The driveway wasn't fancy, just a narrow gravel strip that cut from the road to my garage, but it was mine, clearly marked, deeded, and older than the HOA itself. Every morning I used it to get to work, and every evening I pulled in tired, expecting peace. Instead, for weeks, there it was, the same luxury sedan, parked sideways like a deliberate insult, blocking my exit as if daring me to say something. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. New neighbor, unfamiliar layout, honest confusion. I left a polite note under the wiper explaining that the driveway was private and asking them to avoid blocking it. The next morning, the note was gone. The car was still there. Day 2, same thing. Day 3, worse. Parked even closer, bumper inches from my gate. That's when I met her. She stepped out as I stood there waiting, phone in hand, already late. Sunglasses, tight smile, HOA badge clipped proudly to her jacket. She told me she was temporarily parking while checking violations and that I could wait a few minutes. When I pointed to the posted private drive sign, she laughed and said, "The HOA override signage." That was my first real mistake, thinking this would be a short problem. Over the next 2 weeks, it became routine. Her car appeared whenever it suited her. Sometimes for 10 minutes. Sometimes for hours. Once, I missed a delivery because I couldn't get out. Another time, I had to leave my car at the curb and walk because she blocked me in again. Every complaint I filed with the HOA vanished into silence. Every email went unanswered. Neighbors noticed. A few apologized quietly. One warned me not to push it, said she was connected on the board. That explained the confidence. The entitlement. The way she waved me off every time I asked her to move. One afternoon, I snapped a photo and called non-emergency. By the time the officer arrived, the car was gone. The report went nowhere. She started smirking after that, like she knew the timing game. Then came the citation. A bright orange notice taped to my door, improper driveway markings. Obstruction hazard. Issued by the HOA. The irony was sharp enough to cut. She was blocking my driveway and fining me for it. That night, I pulled out my property file. Deed. Survey. Recorded easement boundaries. HOA bylaws. Parking regulations. Municipal code. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for options. And I found one. Buried in city ordinance was a clause about obstructing a private drive with posted signage. It didn't require police. It didn't require HOA approval. It required proof and a call to a licensed tow operator contracted with the city. The next morning, right on schedule, her sedan slid into place, blocking me in again. She didn't even get out this time. Just left it there, engine ticking as it cooled. I took photos from 3 angles. I zoomed in on the sign. The curb cut. The address number. Time-stamped everything. Then I made the call. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't confront her. I didn't warn her. I just followed the rules she thought didn't apply. And by the time she came back, clipboard ready, confidence fully intact, the space where her car had been was completely empty. No note. No warning. Just gravel, sunlight, and silence. The morning after her car disappeared, the neighborhood was buzzing. Word spreads fast when someone in the HOA thinks they can act above the rules, only to be humiliated quietly, but undeniably. I stayed calm, watching from the porch as she arrived in a rental SUV, because her luxury sedan was still nowhere to be seen. Her face fell as she scanned the driveway, realizing immediately that the obstruction she relied on for power was gone. She ran up with her clipboard, muttering about emergency towing and unauthorized removal. I listened politely. Let her words fill the air while I calmly mentioned that the city ordinance about blocking private drives had been followed perfectly. She waved her hands, claiming HOA authority, claiming she had board connections, and claiming she was within her rights. I asked her a simple question. "Did you check the local code before parking here for weeks?" She stammered. "No, we are HOA policies," she tried. I held up my folder of documentation. Recorded deed, driveway boundaries, signed easement, city ordinance, and all the photo proof of her repeated obstruction. The weight of facts was heavier than any HOA badge. Neighbors began peeking out their windows. Some whispered. Some smiled. A few came over and asked if she had permission. She froze. She had no support. No neighbors were backing her. Even the HOA's supposed power dissolved when confronted with facts and public observation. Minutes later, she called the HOA, frantically. They tried to claim their authority extended to my driveway. I calmly read them the ordinance over the phone, line by line. They faltered, stammered, and eventually told her to resolve it without involving them further. By the time she hung up, she looked like a defeated puppet. Then came the second surprise. I didn't stop at the ordinance. I had arranged a professional tow company, fully licensed, documented, and ready. They arrived at the exact time she returned to check the driveway again. She could only watch as the operators confirmed the removal was legal, attached the sedan to their truck, and drove it safely to an authorized lot. She shouted, but no one listened. The tow operator followed the letter of the law, nothing more, nothing less. By mid-morning, the car was gone. The driveway was clear. My access was fully restored. HOA Karen now realized she had been powerless without the city code and proper procedure backing her. Her frustration was visible, almost comical if it weren't so humiliating. Neighbors who had witnessed the event offered cautious congratulations. Some even said they'd been too scared to confront her before. I smiled, nodded, and reminded them that authority without facts or legal backing is nothing but an illusion. By the end of the day, HOA Karen tried filing an internal complaint with the board, claiming trespass and unauthorized towing. I responded with the ordinance, city permit, and photo evidence. The board quickly decided they didn't want to get involved. She had underestimated the power of documentation, the law, and patience. But what she didn't know yet was that the next day would escalate even further. The HOA, now embarrassed, made the mistake of trying to involve law enforcement to recover her car, a move that would finally cement her defeat once and for all. The next morning, HOA Karen showed up early, looking like she'd slept badly. Her rental SUV replaced her missing luxury sedan, but her confidence was gone. She called the HOA board first thing, demanding they fix the situation, insisting that the city code couldn't possibly override their authority. What she didn't realize was that her calls were going straight into voicemail while I prepared for the next step. By mid-morning, 2 police officers arrived at the scene. Not because I called them, but because she had escalated the issue, claiming unauthorized removal of her vehicle. She expected to intimidate me, to have the law enforce her will. Instead, the officers politely asked for details. I handed over every document: the city ordinance, the driveway's posted signage, timestamps of her repeated violations, and the tow company's official report. The officers studied the paperwork carefully. The HOA Karen's face fell as they explained that her car had been legally removed because it was obstructing a private driveway. She tried to argue that the HOA had special privileges, but the deputies reminded her that private driveways aren't governed by HOA whims. That phrase, HOA whims, seemed to hit harder than anything I had said. Neighbors began to gather discreetly, watching from porches and windows. Some whispered congratulations, some just shook their heads at her arrogance. She tried to regain control, pointing fingers, waving papers, even calling out names of supporters on the HOA board. But the officers ignored her theatrics, calmly confirming everything I had presented. Then came the final blow. The deputies asked for her copy of the board authorization for her actions. She handed over a single blurry internal memo with no legal power and no city approval. One officer glanced at me and nodded. "All of this," he said, "doesn't grant authority over private property." Her face turned red. She sputtered. Words failed. Everyone could see that the power she had wielded for weeks was just smoke and mirrors. By the end of the conversation, the deputies advised her to avoid private property disputes in the future and left, leaving the rental SUV parked where it didn't belong, though I had already contacted the tow company again, this time coordinating with them to ensure she wouldn't block the driveway ever again. The HOA board later sent an official notice, asking her to apologize and reassess procedures. It was the only acknowledgement of their failure. For the first time, the HOA Karen experienced what happens when entitlement meets law, documentation, and patience. By sunset, the driveway was fully clear. My car sat unobstructed. The HOA had no leverage, no authority, and no options left. And I knew the next day would solidify the final lesson. Rules are stronger than arrogance, and preparation beats bullying every time. By the fourth day, the problem wasn't just her. It was the pattern. Entitlement doesn't retire quietly. It looks for loopholes. And sure enough, she tried one. Instead of parking directly across the driveway, she began stopping just close enough to make entry awkward. Tires angled, nose jutting over the curb cut. Not technically blocking, but close enough to signal, I'm still here. I didn't react. I documented. Every morning, I photographed the position. Every evening, I logged the timestamps. I added the measurements, distance from the curb cut, angle relative to the posted sign. I pulled municipal guidelines that defined interference with ingress and egress, a broader standard than simple blockage. The law didn't care about her intent. It cared about effect. She noticed the camera, smiled at it once. That told me everything. Then the HOA tried a new tactic. A letter arrived, formal, stamped, and smug, claiming my driveway markings were non-compliant and demanding I repaint them to HOA standards. I laughed, then pulled the city code. My markings exceeded requirements. The HOA's standards didn't apply to private drives not under their jurisdiction. I sent a one-page response with citations and a copy to the city's code office. 2 days later, code enforcement showed up. Not to inspect me, to inspect the complaint. The officer walked the drive, checked the signage, measured the clearance, and asked how long the obstruction had been happening. I handed over the log. Photos. Dates. Tow records. Prior police report numbers. He nodded, thanked me, and left. That afternoon, the HOA sent a second letter, shorter this time, requesting cooperation. I didn't respond. Instead, I filed a formal notice with the city to designate the driveway as a protected private access point, which triggered automatic enforcement authority. From that point forward, any vehicle interfering, intentionally or not, could be cited and removed without warning. The approval came through the next morning. She tried once more. The rental SUV rolled up and stopped in that familiar, almost blocking angle. I waited 10 minutes, enough to document interference. Then I made the call. Same tow company. Same ordinance. This time, faster. When she came out, clipboard in hand, it was already too late.
She didn't shout. She didn't argue.
She just stared as the truck pulled away, the illusion finally gone. This wasn't about dominance anymore. It was about permanence. Word spread. Neighbors stopped her from parking near their homes. A board member emailed asking me to be patient. I replied with a city designation number and nothing else. The message was clear. This was no longer personal. It was procedural. By the end of the week, a new HOA policy went out reminding enforcement staff to avoid private access points and comply with municipal law. Her name wasn't on it, but everyone knew why it existed. The driveway stayed clear. No more angled parking. No more smirks. No more clipboard visits. The space remained what it had always been, functional, quiet, respected. And the silence was louder than any apology. But consequences don't always end with behavior changes. Sometimes they follow people home. The aftermath was quiet, almost serene. The driveway, once a battlefield of entitlement, was now completely mine again. No car, no smirk, no clipboard. The city designation protected access, and the HOA had no legal grounds to challenge it. Every vehicle, every resident, every visitor could see the line had been drawn, and it wasn't moving. The HOA Karen tried one last attempt, emailing the board to request special permission to coordinate driveway use. The board, now painfully aware of her repeated failures, forwarded the message to me with a note. We will not respond further. Her authority evaporated faster than her vehicle ever had. Neighbors who had previously avoided confronting her began speaking up. Some apologized for staying silent. Others asked how I handled it. I explained calmly. Patience, preparation, and knowing your rights are stronger than fear or intimidation. That message spread, and the HOA's influence in the neighborhood quietly diminished. The HOA Karen herself stopped showing up. No more parking stunts. No more citations. Her presence became a story residents recounted with a mix of disbelief and amusement. For weeks, the driveway remained clear, the only movement the wind through the trees and the occasional deer crossing the gravel path. Months later, the HOA quietly updated their bylaws, adding language to prevent staff from interfering with private driveways and specifying municipal code compliance. No public announcement. No acknowledgement of error. Just the silent correction of a mistake that had been visible to anyone paying attention. For me, the victory wasn't in embarrassment or retribution, it was in stability. The driveway functioned again as it should. My daily routines weren't disrupted. The property, the land, the cabin, my rights, remained intact. And the lesson traveled farther than the gravel road ever could. Authority unbacked by law is powerless, and patience, with the proper documentation, always wins. HOA Karen faded into memory. The driveway, the cabin, the peace, they endured. And that, in the end, was more satisfying than any confrontation could ever have been.